Thank you for inviting me tonight. I do want to give a special shout out to my neighbors in North Lawndale and Garfield Park. Being a resident of South Lawndale for the past 51 years, you are my neighbors. Again, thank you. As I've said it before, I'll say it again. Public transit is not an option. Public transit is a lifeline. CTA trains and PACE buses are the arteries of our city, and they've kept our people moving, especially frontline workers, and they've kept our economy afloat during the most uncertain times. Nurses heading into work, the front lines of this pandemic. Grocery store workers going to work to stock the shelves, janitors and home care workers keeping our workplaces and our loved ones safe. Public transit is essential and we must protect it. There's no doubt that we've been hit hard. The virus has essentially brought us to our knees, but one thing has remained certain. Without public transit, the American economy would have grinded to a screeching halt. Instead, the hardworking women and men at CTA, and I'm glad to see that Keith Hill and Kenny Franklin are going to be speaking later today. PACE and bus and public transit agencies across the country continue to roll up their sleeves, put on their masks, and get to work every day. Transit workers are frontline workers, and they're helping other essential workers get their job done too. Now, we, Congress, must step up. I'm preaching to the choir, but the reality is, from school-age children to working parents and even the elderly, public transit isn't an option, it is a lifeline. For working class people, especially Black and brown communities, public transit is essential. I work on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and I've made it my personal mission to make sure our committee begins to grapple with the role that highways and transportation planning have contributed to systemic racism and inequity in America. Our over-reliance on cars puts a massive financial burden on working people. The priority on highways and roads creates physical barriers to opportunities for millions. Public transit is a great equalizer. It's affordable and it's reliable, and now more than ever, we must step up. If Congress fails to keep our transit agencies solvent, if we don't provide them at least the $32 billion in the next stimulus package, we are all in for a world of hurt. And for Latino and Black communities who rely on public transit, this is very little shoestring left to survive on. That's why we sent a letter with 110 members of Congress demanding that we keep our public transit agencies afloat. The $15 billion that we're hearing may be in an end-of-year relief bill is just not enough. Every morning I get up, I see my neighbors head out to take the CTA or the bus. It's part of life here. Think of the immigrant mom barely making ends meet, but trying to get to work downtown. The single dad who's trying to save for his kids' college tuition, but headed into the local hospital for another 12-hour shift. Failing to keep our trains moving will upend thousands of lives, and it would most certainly upend the economy of our nation's greatest economic hubs like Chicago. And that's why tomorrow I'm pushing the envelope further, because it's not just about saving transit. During COVID, yes, that's step one, but we need to think in the longer term. We need to question why transit has always been starved of federal investment. Tomorrow, I'm introducing a resolution with 33 members of Congress calling for equal funding in transit, equal to the amount highways get, because right now it's an 80-20% split. No wonder our transit agencies are starved. No wonder trips can sometimes be infrequent or delayed due to maintenance issues. They need resources. We can't just save transit. We need to invest in transit like never before, and we need to keep our transit workers safe and on the job. Frontline transit workers have kept our trains running. They get up early every day and get the job done. Now it's time for Congress to do the same. Let's save public transit and let's invest in it to help communities thrive. Thank you so much.
Wow, that's quite a vigorous statement there. I thank you so much. I almost feel like I don't have any questions with a statement like that, but I will proceed. Um, assuming that the current budget gap and crisis is addressed, and I know that's a big assumption, but that's why we're an advocacy organization. And at the end of this program and throughout it, we'll be talking about how you can make your voice heard on these matters. But assuming that the current budget gap is addressed and allowing public transportation to continue without service disruption, what is the prospect for more vigorous and sustainable federal support for public transportation? And what can people do in the audience in general to support that goal? And I'm really excited to hear about the resolution that you're putting forth with your colleagues. That's a great step forward.
Well, to your question, Robert, that's up to us. We need to build a grassroots movement around transit in the way that we've seen it develop around health equity, immigration reform, or even environmental sustainability. Congress is reactionary. Without actual activists and grassroots pressure, members of Congress aren't compelled to change the status quo. Are we telling our elected officials why transit is important? Are people organizing to make their voices heard on this issue? More importantly, are pro-transportation advocates effectively communicating to decision makers that transportation is first and foremost as an equity issue? We're talking about access to jobs, healthcare, school. We're talking about physical barriers to opportunity, physical divisions like highways carving up working class communities, making it impossible to get to places without a car. Folks need to step up, put pressure on members, and make this an issue about equity. And now is the time, especially, Robert, because this year, in next year, in the new Congress, with a new administration in the White House, there's going to be a lot of talk about a large transportation and infrastructure bill. That's the best chance we will have had to make an impact on transit investment.
Oh, well, that's great. That's great. That really dovetails into my next question here. And, I'm just as young as you are, and I've seen a lot of debates out there on the public sphere. And, what disappoints me when people talk about public transit and public transportation is it's a key role not only for the people that use it, but everyone relies on it. If you're a law partner and you're downstairs ordering your Starbucks coffee, your barista probably got there to be able to serve you by public transportation. You know, ultimately, public transportation is a job creator, and I wondered what can we do to make that argument stronger in the media, among your colleagues in the Congress, the incoming Biden administration, and I do know he's an Amtrak lover, and just to take that argument that public transportation is a job creator to the general public and the media.
People tend to take public transit for granted. We accept that it's in some places and in others where it's not. We often fail to remember that almost 70% of the U.S. gross domestic product, everything that we create in the country, is generated from major urban hubs like Chicago. And in those hubs, we have a huge percentage of working class folk who rely on transit. Midsummer, a poll went out and demonstrated that nearly 25% of frontline essential workers rely on transit in Chicago alone. No one talks about that. No one talks about how weakened our economy would be without the arteries that make our cities thrive. Transit. We need to lift the conversation up. That's what I'm fighting for in the Future of Transportation caucus that I launched in Congress last year. Next year will be a great opportunity to you ramp the conversation about transit up. The infrastructure and transit investment that can be made is huge. And let's take advantage of the fact that President-elect Biden was a longtime transit user, so he knows firsthand. This is an opportunity like never before to move our country in a direction of sustainable transportation systems that bring equity, especially to those communities that have been disinvested in systematically for such a long time, and to create thriving, healthy neighborhoods with good transit.
Absolutely. That's a great segue there. The health and ecological benefits for the environment, the sustainability, those items are very important. And, many communities of color are very highly disproportionately impacted by um, detrimental health impact. I'm thinking of highways. I'm just thinking of pollution in general. Um, in parts of the city, we have highways running through here. Essentially, I live a block away from Cicero Avenue. Um, could you maybe just riff a little bit on what might be the sustainability and health benefits of and environmental benefits for public transportation? Because I think those arguments aren't well understood either.
With good public transit, we can get people out of their cars. With good transit that's reliable, that's safe and clean, and can move people to and from jobs, people can save a lot of money not being married to their cars. Cars are very, very expensive when you think about all the costs and maintenance. Good transit can advance the idea of transit-oriented development so that we build affordable family housing in areas with good access to transit and transportation to improve the quality of life, to get to work, to get to school, to get to cultural amenities, museums, great libraries, good entertainment, on and on. And I want you to know I'm pushing for transit-oriented development as one of the solutions to poor people of color getting pushed out of some of the nicest communities in Chicago because of gentrification. We need to build affordable housing, family housing, housing that's accessible to people with disabilities, and of course close to transit assets all over our communities. This is not only pertinent to Chicago, it's good for New York, it's good for LA, it's good for Atlanta, it's good for all of the growing cities. So if we want to improve the quality of life, reduce the amount of carbon emissions, and make communities and our country and the world more sustainable, transit is a key ingredient to making that happen.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Congressman. Like I said, 30 years ago when I moved here to the city, and people were mentioning who were the activists to know, your name was among the first mentioned, and it's been a pleasure to work with you from time to time over the years.
Thank you.
What's really important, though, I think, for the people here in the audience is that we're not just talking about Chicago. We're just not talking about CTA. We're not just talking about Peoria and Joliet. This is a problem that New York is facing, DC is facing, LA is facing. The transit systems, and I'm just naming the major ones. I haven't even talked about the minor cities. What can we do to finally, as a big effort, especially right now, as the sausage is being made, putting together the budget, what can we do right now to have the most impact?
Contact your federal representatives, very important. Contacting your state legislators, the House and Senate members as well, collaboration between the federal government and the states and municipal governments, including small suburban communities as well, is going to be critical. We are about to embark on a journey to transform how we move around as a country, nationally, in states, in cities, in suburban communities. And this is a part of making our country more sustainable, more equitable, to bring racial and ethnic equity to everywhere across the country. So this coming year will be a critical year to advance the cause of good mobility for everyone, especially with underlying equity values, to ensure that everyone is having those opportunities to better their quality of life.
Well, thank you. This has been quite informative, and this discussion couldn't have come at a better time. Thanks to some great collaboration going on, we're going to be seeing the launch of an exciting project involving the Metro Electric and the Rock Island District Line coming on board with South Cook Fair Fares project. We'll be talking about that in the future, and we just really appreciate you spending some time with us today, Congressman.
Thank you.
Any final words before I turn the platform, the Zoom platform, back to Linda?
Let's get ready to advocate like never before for transit. It opens up a world of opportunity and equity for all of our people. 2021 will be a great year of opportunity to set a new agenda for the entire nation and our communities.
Well, thank you on the behalf of myself and my colleagues at Active Trans and everybody on this call. Thank you for your time today, Congressman Garcia.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.